What's up, everybody? Your friendly death investigator here, and today, welcome back to another episode on the expanded YouTube channel we got going now. I haven't done it yet, but I'll probably put these on the actual Autopsy podcast feed. I'll just convert them to just audio files only, just if you ever want to listen to it. But they'll always be on YouTube. And today, I wanted to touch on this particular case that you can see right here. The man's name is Oleg, and I'm not trying to upset the the YouTube powers that be with this one. There's some sensitive stuff about it. I'm going to tap dance around it as best I can. Most of you will be able to infer exactly what I'm getting at. Um, but yeah, there's certain things you don't want to say, and not only that, you're dealing with a sensitive subject, compounded with another sensitive subject. Um, but this is a Russian case, and this was a case that I heard about on some news. It was, I think it was some sort of like conservative like news program, and I heard it, and it sounded like a joke. Like when you hear the case and kind of you hear, I don't know, there seems to be some slight deviations in terms of like what's actually factual. Um, but when you hear like the gist of it, you're just like, that sounds insane. It sounds like something out of a movie. And yeah, and when I heard it, I was like, well, that would be an interesting case for something to do with, it is related to medical examiner, or it has a nice little tie to it. Um, but one thing that I'm not super sure about is I don't know much about pathology and medical examiners when it comes to Russia. This is a Russian case. Um, I don't know how they operate. I don't know what kind of system they have, what kind of standards they have. If they're autonomous, your guess is as good as mine. Um, any English speaking Russians from the country, feel free to comment below and let me know exactly how your system works. I'd actually love to know. Or you can email at autopsypodcast@gmail.com, just to, because I'd love to know like how this all, because in the US you do something, a case like this happens, they're getting an autopsy, it's going to be ruled likely as a homicide, but there's some weird stuff with this case. And again, it sounded fake when I first heard it, but there is some legitimacy to some of it. Um, uh, but before we get into it, and it's actually, you can probably tell on the screen, it's actually getting kind of late, and I'm in my hoodie. It's kind of chilly. My dog's asleep. You can probably hear her snoring, the other dog somewhere. But before we get into it, please subscribe to the channel, check out Autopsy Podcast, all that stuff. Please consider supporting on Patreon. I'm going to start doing some bonus sort of stuff like this um, on there. I've already got a couple of things. I mean, there's already some bonus content on there, and everything's always available there, early access and ad and promo free. So please consider. Otherwise, just comment, share, subscribe, all the things. All right. So this case, whenever I first heard about it, again, it was on a conservative media show, and I sort of like had to stop and rewind, and I was like, what is that? That doesn't that doesn't track in terms of like how this stuff works. Um, so I looked it up, and the guy's name is, uh, I guess we can call him the victim. Some people might be hesitant to call him that once you sort of figure out what's going on with this. And again, I'm not going to say a lot of these words. You can see it on screen. Even that might be a little too touchy for YouTube. I don't really know. There's no explicit pictures or anything, so don't, I'm not trying to trigger anybody. But there's yeah, it's just going to list the guy's name and it's going to kind of explain it. And I'm going to sort of give you a more PG version of what they're getting at. But I wanted to show you this first. This, I have a couple of articles you can sort of see pulled up here. But I wanted to show you when I Google this guy's name, because his name is, his name is Oleg. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce his friend's name, who we'll get to, because I can't pronounce any of his name, but I can pronounce Oleg. There you go. But when you Google his name, this is one of those things where I talk about, you hear about it somewhere and it sounds fake, and then you Google it, and then it doesn't, and not just Google, but actually try to track several articles. This is what shows up when you Google it. When you Google his name, at the very least, you do see there was this guy, he had this name, and he is no longer with us, we'll say. But if you'll look right here, dailymail.co.uk, this is page 1, by the way. This is page 1 of Google of what they give you when you search his name. The very first thing is Daily Mail UK. The next one is New York Post. The next one is The Sun, Metro Co. UK, Mirror Co. The first 3 or 4 articles are all tabloids. And when you hear about this case, you'll wonder, like, you would think some of this must have been picked up by some major network, not necessarily even the major, like, mainstream stuff, but like some legitimate news source somewhere. And there's a couple, but again, this is page 1 of Google when you search his name, and the first few it gives you are basically tabloids. Some people might argue New York Post isn't a tabloid. I mean, there's a pretty good argument to say that it's kind of a glorified tabloid. But Daily Mail, shout out to Cherry over at Crimepedia, because I ran that by her. I didn't really explain why, but now she probably knows. She's a British lady, so I was like, hey, is this considered a tabloid over there? And when you look it up on like Wikipedia, it lists it as a tabloid, but I like to at least corroborate that. And Cherry basically told me, yeah, that's considered a tabloid. The Daily Mail, New York Post, glorified tabloid, whatever you want to believe about it. The Sun is a tabloid, and I think the metro.co.uk is a tab. I think that is. I could be wrong. But again, these are the first hits that you get. And they're all like, it's like, as crazy as this case will be when we get to it in just a sec, you would think that someone beyond these handful of tabloids would be listed on page 1 of Google. And I talk about this because this is where it kind of gets, you want to, like, I want to report stuff to you guys that's accurate, and that's kind of what Autopsy, the podcast, is all about, is getting, as many of these facts right as possible. But it's hard to do that when this is kind of what you get, and these are kind of the standards that show up. Because I wouldn't want to report something to you that turned out to be complete crap. And it doesn't, at the very least, it's not complete crap, but there are some middling ideas of what exactly happened. And I was looking over it earlier to try and figure out like what the gist of the story is, because that's about the best I can tell you. And then get into sort of the medical examiner questions part of that. But yeah, this is the page 1 of Google. So the first one, the New York Post, if you actually, like I said, I was looking through this stuff. So to give you kind of the gist of the story, Oleg, the gentleman who is no longer with us, was a friend of this guy. I can't pronounce his name, but we'll call him Russian Dad. They're friends, had been for years, and Russian dad is the father to an 8-year-old girl. Um, and from everything I understand, and it may not be listed explicitly here, um, but some of these articles may have it, and I'm not gonna like sift through it. But I'll list as many of these articles. I'll probably list all the articles you see pulled up here. They'll be in the show notes down below. Um, the gist of the story is these two friends were hanging out at a bar, I think, and Oleg pulls out his phone and he's showing Russian father uh, something like a photo, a video, or something, and he does this. And this is where it literally feels like a movie, or those when people try to show you photos on their phone, but they won't let you swipe. They're like, no, this is what you look at. You don't swipe left or right. I'm guilty of that sometimes. Um, sound Sounds like he was showing him on the phone and he swiped or did something. Who knows? And suddenly a video starts playing, which is an odd coincidence. And that's where you're just kind of like, yeah, maybe that happened. Maybe it didn't happen. Um, but the base story is they were at a bar. He was looking at something on his phone and just happened across this video where Oleg is seen having relations with Russian father's daughter. Uh, Daughter is at the time all this happened, not the video. The time this story began proper, daughter was 8 years old. And again, I'm tap dancing around this. You know exactly what I'm getting at. Um, Russian father talked about like he would often leave his daughter in the care of Oleg. And then there turned out to be another father, another like mutual friend who would also leave them in his care, who also seemed to be a victim of Oleg. And so he sees this, and there's he reacts, I think, the way probably every good parent in this world probably would. There was a confrontation, and and there's some middling details again about what happened immediately following uh, the father seeing this, because it sounds like he just stumbled across it. He wasn't actively looking for it. It just sort of happened. So there was this moment of like shock and confusion, and then I'm sure rage. Um, and ultimately, it the situation, we'll say, culminates and or ends in the woods outside of this town, where Russian father, and then I think the other father, um, the other victim's father, I should say, take Oleg outside of town, force him to dig his own grave, and then, well, as I said in the beginning, Oleg is no longer with us. So this is where it gets sort of iffy, and this is where I'd like to know exactly how this kind of stuff works in Russia, because I don't know. And I tried searching for it. I tried looking for maybe a medical examiner statement or a pathologist statement. Yeah, I'm not really sure what they would call that over there. I would figure pathologist is kind of universal. Um, Medical examiner could be just more uh, European, uh, U.S. type stuff. So, I tried searching various versions of that, and came up kind of empty-handed. So I don't know how they actually handle this stuff over there. Um, but the reason this was brought up on the media site that I was listening to begin with was they said that the death was listed as a suicide. Now think about that for a moment. This this Do we call him a victim? What do we call him? Oleg, who is no longer with us, is showing, or basically gets found out doing some stuff to these people's kids. Um, Actual video proof, and is confronted and winds up in a grave. And they admitted to forcing him to dig his own grave. That seems to be out of all these articles. It all seems pretty verifiable that they did force Oleg to dig his own grave. Um, and then he ultimately meets his demise via a stab wound, which some places say like it was a stab wound to the heart. It only seems like it was one. But yeah, when I heard about this case, they said it was being viewed as a suicide. And again, think of does the likelihood of that, of it being carried out, being forced to dig your own grave, and then you just commit suicide. It's not impossible. Um, and but this is where it gets sort of clunky. Now, give me a second to bring this up. Um, okay, right here. And this is, now I don't think this, like, this is today.n-24.com. I, this doesn't read to me as, as, as a tabloid. Could be. But this is the one article that I saw that explicitly writes this. He was forced to dig his own grave. And then he was later found with a stab wound to the back. And it only, every other source seems to list it as just a single stab wound, and it appears to be a stab wound here. A single stab wound here. But this is the only place I see where it says a stab wound to the back. And again, the joke when I heard about this, because they were kind of making light of this, and it was found in a grave that he had been forced to dig himself with a stab wound to his back, and it was being viewed as suicide. I've said that word a couple times now. That may be frowned upon. Again, it's kind of dark stuff, but there's this edge of just like almost absurdity to it, where you just want to get to the bottom of it. And it's fascinating on an ME's level in terms of, I did death investigations nearly 7 years. A single stab wound to the back. Is it impossible to fall on a knife on the back and hit your heart, something vital, and die? Sure. Sure. Did I ever see anything like that in the time I did it in thousands of cases that I worked? No. Nope. Not even close to anything like that. So it's very curious stuff. But again, this is the only place that explicitly says it was listed as he did it to himself. That word. Everywhere else, it doesn't get that explicit as near as I remember. And this is the Sun, so this is definitely, we're in tabloid land now. Let's see. Oleg, he was 32 when he decided to no longer be with us, allegedly. And ultimately, like this, and one thing that's also seems to be pretty unanimous throughout all of these articles is, this is the New York Post. Russian dad, legal fees are covered from the community. It sounds like the community he lived in covered all his legal fees. I imagine he was charged as a suspect. But to be charged as a suspect, you have to have results from an examination insinuating that someone did something to him and that he didn't just fall on a knife. Um, but I mean, even if that was the story, like, oh, he fell on a knife, okay, that's suspicious any way you slice it. So they're going to question these people. They're going to treat them as suspects. So I don't know. It's that sort of weird like gray area, and I want to say like ultimately like they're not charged. Let's see. Oh yeah, there's some crass words. Again, I hope I don't get I don't want to get off on the wrong foot with YouTube here. So again, I'm just dancing around this as best that I can. Um, but yeah, it sounds like the community came behind this guy and said, "Hey, he stopped a monster as far as we're concerned." Um, this guy did this to at least two uh, kids. It could have been more. It sounded like there possibly was more, but at the very least, it was only. I can only really say it was corroborated as two. Um, and yeah, they're like, he is not an M word. Um, everyone is on his side. The case is still being investigated because, of course, it is. Um, let's see. Father detained. Videos. That's it. Indicated suspects, children. He had been doing this for 5 years. You know, you know what I mean? Okay. Again, I'm not going to repeat a lot of these. I'm not going to repeat the R word. He claimed that Oleg stumbled on the knife during a quarrel. Stumbled on a knife. There you go. Um, there you go. Stumbled on a knife after he was being told, after he did dig his own grave. And there was one of these, I'm not sure which article it is. Again, I'll post all of these below. But one of them mentions um, that I don't think it was the initial dad who kind of discovered it, because again they bring in another dad, and the two of them together confront Oleg out in the woods. And there's like a story like they allowed, like Oleg said, oh, let me go at least go spend a few hours with my mom and then I'll meet you wherever. And it sounds like maybe that's what he did. Who knows? I'm getting my information from uh, maybe not the most reliable sources, but whenever they met him in the woods later, it was two guys and Oleg. And the other dad who was brought into this, from what I understand, was the one that said, dig your own grave. But he alleges, I was just doing that to scare him. And then I think their story is a fight broke out and then he fell on the knife. Again, only one article says it was a stab wound to the back. Um, who knows? That could just be a mistake, intentional or not, but I haven't seen it anywhere else. Um, and yeah, isn't that just this strange, like when you hear it, it's again, the way the story was presented was this abuser digs his own grave, gets stabbed, and then it's investigated and decided as an S word, as he did this to himself word. Um, that's kind of funny, also because it's Russia, and whatever your politics are, Russia sort of has that stigma to it these days of just having some crazy folks. Have you ever met a Russian person? They're a little, they're fun. Uh, they seem to be doing stuff like this, or at least part of this stuff. But again, like if this case makes it to anybody in Russia, I would be honestly thrilled for someone to let me know exactly how things work over there. If this was ultimately made to be a case where the authorities, the pathologists, all of them said, "Oh yeah, yes, he did this to himself. Yes, is that what happened?" Because if that's true, then that's insane. That is absolutely insane. If the workers for the state or however it works over there are going, yeah, he did it. He did it to himself, and that's our final thing. It's one thing for the dad to sort of be held as like, well, he got rid of this guy who was doing terrible things. We don't view him as a bad person. Okay, well, subjective. They have an argument, certainly. Um, but it's another thing for the state itself to say, yeah, there's nothing to this. He did it to himself. Um, that doesn't, that's not a norm over here in the States. Not to say there isn't, some level of corruption, but if that corruption's ever found out, it's page one news and it's not tabloid. And it's usually these people getting fired over stuff like that over here. So I'm curious if over there, if it was truly listed as that. Part of me wants to believe that it probably wasn't, um, but I don't know. Um, but yeah, I wanted to just talk about this case because it's fascinating to read it and to hear about it, and to just think like, oh, they did what now? Are you sure? Some of it's corroborated, some of it is sort of nebulous, some of it's kind of in flux in terms of details. So I don't know. What do you guys think happened? Comments, I do read them. And again, feel free to email at autopsypodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, again, please consider supporting the show any way you can. Leave a review on iTunes, or uh, hit subscribe, share, Patreon. That would be so lovely. But I understand. But again, this is going to be early access because everything is early access, and the audio, this is ultimately, I think, going to be put on the feed. And yeah, that's all I got for this episode, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see y'all next time. All right, bye.